The Ilkhanate, often seen as the most stable of the Mongol Khanates that emerged after the breakup of the empire, was also the first to collapse. Previously, we have talked about the events that led to the end of Mongol rule in China and Russia, and in today's episode in our series on the fall of the Mongol Empire, we will explain how Chinggisid rule in the Middle East came to a violent end. They probably should have taken steps to prevent these losses while they had the chance, and the same goes for when you're losing hair. You'll need the sponsor of our video, Keeps. 2 out of 3 men experience hair loss by the time they're 35, and you need to take action now to avoid this fate. Keeps provides a subscription service that delivers clinically approved hair loss treatments right to your door at half the cost of pharmacy prices. Our lead historian probably could have used this a while back, and now it's too late. Early prevention is key. Keeps will set you up with clinically backed treatments to prevent hair loss and encourage growth, with most users seeing results after 6 months. Plus, the treatment plan includes unlimited round-the-clock messaging with on-staff medical professionals to tailor your own hair care system with personal recommendations. You can add their award-winning thickening shampoo and conditioner to help even further, and all their products get refill reminders to make sure you're always good to go. Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get 50% off your first order, go to keeps.com/kings or click the link in the description. That's keeps.com/kings. Established in the 1260s by Hulagu, the sacker of Baghdad, the Ilkhanate is perhaps one of the best understood of the Mongol Khanates, with a rich body of surviving primary source material. The greatest is the Chronicle of Rashid al-Din, an Ilkhanate vizier, who wrote the immense Jami al-Tawarik, which forms not only one of the most important sources on the Mongol Empire, but also of the Ilkhanate's history up to the early 14th century. Generally, Rashid al-Din portrayed the early Ilkhanate as a period of instability, with Khans more interested in hunting, feasting and drinking rather than governing, allowing greedy viziers and military commanders to have their way. This was punctuated with succession struggles affected by an increasingly powerful Noyad. The Noyad were the descendants of the non-Chinggisid generals who served alongside Hulagu, and had been granted lands and peoples to support themselves. They took keen interest in Khans who were kinder to their privileges. This was coupled with famines, economic woes from intense corruption and foolish policies, including a failed attempt to introduce paper money, as well as expensive periodic wars with the Ilkhanate's neighbours. To Rashid al-Din, this instability ended with the accession of Ghazan as Ilkhan in 1295. Though Rashid likely exaggerates the previous instability in order to glorify his patron Ghazan, there seems to be strong support for a redirection of the Ilkhanate. Aside from the most obvious, which was Ghazan's conversion to Islam and efforts to tie the legitimacy of the Ilkhanate to it, Ghazan oversaw economic revitalization. A major effort was directed to reducing abuses of the empire's agricultural base and farming population. From limiting the numbers of officials, clerks and Mongols who sought to provide for themselves by extraordinary demands on the population, to stamping out banditry with highway patrols. These were accompanied by monetary reforms and new silver currency, bearing not Mongolian inscriptions, but the Shahada and Ghazan's title of Padishah-i-Islam. Measurements and weights throughout the Ilkhanate were ordered standardized based on those in Tabriz to facilitate trade between regions. Canals and underground waterways were built to provide water for cities and irrigation. He also forbade the practice of enticing young women into prostitution. He must have had some success, as he soon had the funds for a massive new construction project at Tabriz, including a magnificent tomb for himself. Along the Ilkhanate's borders, he concluded a peace treaty with Tokhta Khan of the Golden Horde and invaded the Mamluk Sultanate, scoring the only notable victory of the Mongol-Mamluk War near Homs in December 1299, though ultimately withdrew before the onset of summer. In 1304, Ghazan, like all good Mongol princes, died in his early 30s. During his reign, he had succeeded in killing a great many potential rivals to the throne, but produced no heirs. His brother Ul-Jeta thus succeeded him, and continued many of Ghazan's policies. Unlike him, he wavered between multiple faiths, and won no victories over the Mamluks, but with the other Khanates, he recognized the overlordship of the Great Khan in the Great Mongol Peace of 1304. So was the Pax Mongolica finally, if briefly, instated. Uljeta's greatest success compared to his brother was that he actually had a son to succeed him. When Uljeta died in 1316, aged 36, his 12-year-old son Abu Sayyid was raised to the throne under the guidance of the regent, the powerful Noyan Choban. Abu Sayyid never wavered in his faith. He was the first Ilkhan who was raised and would die a Sunni Muslim, who, unlike his father and uncle, never showed interest in Shi'ism. Choban, as described by the great scholar of the Ilkhanate Charles Melville, saw himself as a servant of the Chinggisid dynasty, albeit an exceptionally powerful one, who combined adherence to the Khans with observing Sharia law. So Choban protected the young Abu Sayyid and ensured he had a proper Islamic education, teaching him to read, write, and speak Persian and Arabic, while also versing him in the history and genealogies of the house of Chinggis Khan and the Noyad. Abu Sayyid throughout his life maintained a love of poetry and music, and after peace was reached with the Mamluks, exchanged poems with the Sultan al-Nasir Muhammad. Abu Sayyid Ilkhan's early reign was often tumultuous. Dominated by Choban Noyan, the two fought off Chagatai and Golden Horde invasions and internal rebellions, during which the young Abu Sayyid earned the epithet Ba'atar for his courage after throwing himself into battle. Despite working well together and achieving peace with the Mamluks, Abu Sayyid's desire for Choban's daughter, the beautiful Baghdad Khatun, resulted in Abu Sayyid killing almost all of Choban's family, including the great Noyan himself. After Choban's death, Abu Sayyid's sole rule was remembered as a golden age by succeeding generations. It was in this period that the famous traveller Ibn Battuta passed through the Ilkhanate, remarking that Abu Sayyid was still a beardless youth and the most beautiful of God's creatures. Yet despite no lack of effort on his part, the Khan failed to produce an heir. When it became clear that no child would form in Baghdad Khatun's belly, Abu Sayyid's eyes wandered and fell onto Dilshad Khatun. She was a daughter of Dimashq Khwaja, Baghdad Khatun's brother, who Abu Sayyid had murdered several years prior. With a new target for his affections, he began to ignore Baghdad Khatun, particularly when Dilshad Khatun became pregnant with his first child. As Baghdad Khatun's influence waned, Abu Sayyid did not realize the mistake he had made. In November 1335, when Abu Sayyid was marching north to confront a Golden Horde attack, Baghdad Khatun is alleged to have made her move. In the account of Ibn Battuta's, a man, it should be noted, who greatly enjoyed a good yarn, after one last bout of sexual intercourse, Baghdad Khatun wiped down Abu Sayyid with a poisoned handkerchief. Regardless of the veracity of Battuta's tale, as this was far from the only exaggerated story he told of women and sex, Abu Sayyid was dead, only 30 years old. This is popularly cited as the end of the Ilkhanate. With Abu Sayyid's death, the line of Hulagu became functionally extinct. Abu Sayyid's uncle, Ghazan, had pruned the lineage, and alcoholism took care of much of the rest. The fact that few Ilkhans lived past 35, with fewer and fewer heirs each generation, has led many to search for underlying causes beyond just alcohol. Scholars such as Anne Broadbridge have suggested this was a consequence of inbreeding, given the Ilkhan's preferences for marrying into the same families over generations. The combined effects of rampant alcohol abuse among both men and women and the consanguinity may explain the alarming drop-off in fertility of the Ilkhanate elite over the last decades of the 13th century. While Hulagu had produced quite the brood of little Chinggisids, at least 25 sons and daughters, by the end of the century, Ghazan only had a daughter survive childhood, while his brother Uljeta had numerous children stillborn or dying young. From his 12 wives, Uljeta only had 3 children ever reach marriageable age, Abu Sayyid and 2 daughters, one of whom still predeceased him. Abu Sayyid himself, despite considerable efforts, only succeeded in impregnating his widow Dilshad Khatun. There were no surviving brothers, sons, or clear male figures in the line of Hulagu to head the state. Yet the explanation of Abu Sayyid's death without heir, directly causing the fall of the Ilkhanate, has been, in the opinion of scholars like Charles Melville, somewhat overstated. The image of the Ilkhanate falling without a decline, a counter to Edward Gibbon, encourages us to overlook problems which had developed. Essentially, Melville notes, a gap had widened between the military elite, the Noyad, and the Ilkhan, which accompanied a lack of respect for the Chinggisids. The death of a monarch with no clear heir was hardly a new issue in the Mongol Empire. The Kurultai system, wherein a candidate was confirmed by the princes, could supply new khans at need, with a regent heading things until this could be sorted out. The unified Mongol Empire and other khanates were ruled in this fashion at times. In the form of Baghdad Khatun, the Ilkhanate clearly had a powerful woman to step into the role. The well-connected Baghdad Khatun was described as an intimidating, intelligent, and proud woman who openly walked around with a sword strapped to her waist and greatly influenced matters of state. In the opinion of some, Abu Sayyid was bossed around by her. In a more classic Mongolian system, Baghdad Khatun would have been an obvious regent. But as Melville argues, the actions of the Khans from Ghazan onward had alienated the military elite. More or less, they must have felt disenfranchised from the government, and that the old Mongolian way of life was being abandoned. Certainly, Islamization was the most obvious demonstration of this. Ghazan and Uljeta both abandoned the traditional secret burials of Mongol Khans in favor of massive, expensive, and very public mausoleums. The Kurultai as a means of choosing the next ruler and affecting major decisions was abandoned, and even the end of the war with the Mamluks, not by conquest but by diplomacy, must have felt like a betrayal of Mongol imperial ideology. By removing their stake in government and not replacing it with a new loyalty to adhere to in the replacement system, the Ilkhans had gradually undermined the need of the Noyad to maintain Chinggisid ideology or rule. When Abu Sayyid came to the throne in 1317, he was but a 12-year-old boy. The long period of Choban's regency further reduced the Khan's authority and increased that of the military elite. Only after Choban's death in 1327 did Abu Sayyid really rule in his own right, and did so for only 8 years. His vizier, Ghiyath al-Din Muhammad, the son of the late Rashid al-Din, sought to enforce tax reforms that would have strengthened the hand of the central government towards the regional princes and their appanages. It seemed to have been an ineffective measure that only angered these military princes. Per Melville's theory, the only outcome of such failed measures was only widening the gap between the Ilkhan and the military elite. On Abu Sayyid's death in November 1335, it fell to the vizier, Ghiyath al-Din Muhammad, to try and steer the ship in the face of Uzbek Khan's invasion. Only 5 days later, on December 5th, Ghiyath al-Din orchestrated the enthronement of the new Khan, a man named Apa Kayan. Apa was not a descendant of Hulagu, but of Hulagu's younger brother, Arik Borke. Plucked from obscurity by Ghiyath al-Din, he was chosen for his ability to lead the army, for all indication is that Apa Khan was a man of military background, an old-school Mongol in the words of every secondary source that mentions him. Apa was given command of the Ilkhanid army, and in winter 1335 forced Uzbek back to the Golden Horde. Apa Khan returned triumphant, and Ghiyath al-Din had high hopes for his new protege. Apa was a competent commander, proven in his defense of the Ilkhanate, a promising figure to rally the Mongols around. Apparently, he had little taste for court procedure or niceties, and it is unclear if he was a Muslim. One anonymous Armenian chronicler asserts Apa was a Christian, and at the very least he was always proud of the old ways. We might wonder if Ghiyath al-Din was deliberate here too, choosing a man who would be more palatable to the Noyad due to his distaste of courtly life. In the opinion of Oleg Grabar and Sheila Blair, it was shortly after Apa's ascension that Ghiyath al-Din ordered the commission of a great Mongol Shahnameh, a wonderfully illustrated version of the Persian national epic by Firdausi. An undertaking of massive expense, Given the large and lovingly detailed artwork, it certainly indicates that the top levels of the Ilkhanate elite did not imagine they were entering into a crisis anytime soon. But Apa Khan was not on solid footing. Abu Sayyid's widow, the pregnant Dilshad Khatun, had fled to Ali Padshah, the governor of Diyarbakir. Ali Padshah's sister, Abu Sayyid's mother, Haji Khatun, also opposed Apa's enthronement. In an effort to shore up his legitimacy, Apa Khan was married to Abu Sayyid's sister, Sati Bey. Commanders who had been alienated or jailed by Abu Sayyid were given expensive gifts or freed from prison. And the blame for Abu Sayyid's death was laid squarely on Baghdad Khatun, who never had the chance to assume the regency. Accused not just of poisoning Abu Sayyid, but of treason with the Golden Horde, Baghdad Khatun was executed, supposedly beaten to death by a Greek slave with a club. Apa Khan still looked for enemies in the wrong direction. Ali Padshah rallied those unhappy with Apa's placement as Khan, an energetic man who might reduce their privileges. Dilshad Khatun had finally given birth to Abu Sayyid's only child, a girl, but this did not stop Ali Padshah's maneuvering. At the start of 1336, Ali Padshah raised his own candidate, Musa, as Ilkhan. Supposedly a grandson of a former Ilkhan, Musa was entirely a puppet of Ali Padshah. In alliance with Haji Khatun and Sheikh Hassan Jalayir, who had once been forced to give up his wife, Baghdad Khatun, to Abu Sayyid, Ali Padshah, in the name of Musa Ilkhan, armed a revolt against Apa Ilkhan. In April of 1336, Apa's army was defeated in the field. He and Ghiyath al-Din Muhammad were soon captured and killed. So ended the reign of Apa Khan, the final Ilkhan to wield any individual authority. Apa's death can be considered the true end of the Ilkhanate, for it removed any attachment the regional commanders held to the Ilkhanate state. Ali Padshah's enthronement of Musa Khan gave all of them the realization that each too could rule through his own puppet Chinggisid if he happened to have one on hand. From 1335 until 1343, no less than 8 Ilkhans were declared by these commanders. Most are known only by their names and who controlled them. The allies who had taken down Apa Khan immediately fought each other and appointed their own candidates. By 1338, a grandson of Choban named Hassani Küçük, Little Hassan, enthroned his grandfather's widow Sati Bey, daughter of the late Ilkhan ul Jaytur, sister of Abu Sayyid, and also the widow of Apa Khan. For the first time, late in 1338, a Chinggisid woman became Khan. Coins were minted in her name, bearing the title of Khan. The khutbah was read in her name, and she was officially the ruler of the Ilkhanate, such as it was. But Sati Bey Khan, the only Chinggisid female Khan, held no real power, and largely was a tool through which Little Hassan maintained his power. By the middle of 1339, she was married off to the next puppet Khan, before disappearing in the 1340s. The pretext of an Ilkhanate was maintained until the 1350s, when the final puppet ruler was deposed in 1353. The new Persianized Turco-Mongolian dynasties in northwestern Iran and Iraq, the Chobanids and Jalayirids, claimed descent and legitimacy from being generals of Ilkhans, but did not take the title themselves. Eastwards, rule fell to local dynasties and warlords, while westwards, new Turkic beyliks, from the Kara Kayunlu to the Osmanli, rose. Chinggisid legitimacy as the basis for rule did not long outlast Abu Sayyid, and it took a surprising figure to reinstate its legitimacy in the region, Timur Ilang, or Tamerlane. We are planning more videos on the history of the Mongols, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see them. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.